Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure.
Hi, Donna Fallowes. Welcome to the Adventures of Self. Lovely to see you this morning.
Lovely to see you, Taylor.
So this is take two. We tried take one, and I neglected to push record on one of my devices. So we'll be doubly spontaneous for this time. Um, so uh, Donna, you and I have known each other for many years in a few different guises. But I really just want to, maybe just for listeners, start off by talking a little bit about why I asked you to come on the show, which is really talk about your adventures with movement. I think art and movement. You've done a lot in dance, movement therapy, art therapy. I'm probably not even giving it enough kudos. So just tell me a little bit about, like, what's where you are professionally and personally in your in your creations.
Yeah, well, I think, I'd like to go back to the beginning, really, contemplating the adventures of self. I was really lucky. I have a mother that demonstrated risk-taking in front of me, that was quite creative in her own nature. And I was lucky enough at 12 years old to be invited into the place that she worked. And this was an activity center for the elderly. And it was a 6 weeks holiday. And I'm like, oh, do I have to go with you? And she said, you come on, and if you work hard, you can use the dance studio and practice. So I said, all right then. And off I went. And when I walked in, I was just, well, the first thing I felt was electricity in the air, like a sense of an electric feeling. And I was in a creative hub. And these were my elders. And they were dancing, painting, skill sharing, creating, making. And, how that landed on me as a child was just, first of all, that, like, my elders are fantastic. Look how creative they are and how alive they are. But it was that sense of community, them doing things they loved, things they felt inspired by, things that got them buzzed, but together. And yeah, that was huge. That had a huge impact on me. It's like I want to say, like a bell being rung inside me, and it just echoed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just on those 2 points, it's really, really lovely to hear, because I mean, that's amazing, right? At sort of age 12, right? You kind of stepped into something and had a opening to something that was so in line with your spirit. But it sounds like what's it wasn't so much the dance and the movement. It was that here were people, being in full expression. That as you say, elders who are showing the way for you. And in many ways, I think you and I've talked about this in the past. We've kind of lost that connection with elders, right? There's sort of fantasizing and fetishizing of youth today, which nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it does often neglect what our elders and the wisdom that's come from their experience kind of belittles that sometimes. So it's beautiful to hear that that struck a chord for you, and also the concept of community, which I know is something that you continue to develop in your work today.
Definitely, Taylor. Yeah. And, I want to say also that I think the structures were much different back then, right? So the guy that, what I'm speaking to, the fact that the guy that headed that place up, he felt he had agency to take a risk, and he tapped into the untapped potential in his team. For instance, he sent my mum on a course to become a dance fitness instructor. She'd never done it before. but he just saw something in her, you know. So I think there was it was a hub, that he created, and it was like a hive of possibilities. And so therefore the elders just were able to go, yeah, I have all this experience and I have all this passion and this inspiration, and now I have somewhere to share it. And it's unfettered. You know, we have basic structures, but we have room for movement, we have room for creative innovation. And I think that almost in what we see in the world today and in structures in businesses and things, is that there's been an atrophy of creativity. And that's something that I'm really passionate about in my work, is, you know, when I work with teams, is really bringing playfulness, creative play forward, so that we can begin to, I suppose, come back into that I experienced when I was 12, you know, demonstrated to me.
Yeah, what's really, I mean, one word that you've mentioned twice that really stands out at me with both your mom and the the head of this facility is this concept of risk,
Yes.
right? Which you know, like we're very risk averse. I mean, as a sort of culture and society, we're very risk averse these days, and it's not, you know, risk seems dangerous. Risk seems uncertain and and dangerous. So most practices are about limiting or eliminating, or really trying to eliminate risk, rather than, you know, like what you're talking about. I think is maybe using it strategically, where, you know, there is this kind of you know, I've talked to other people. There's this kind of like creative edge where, you know, it's where there is risk. It's not, you know, undue, deathly, like cavalier, abandoned risk, but it is going into that uncertainty where creativity happens, where we expand ourselves.
Exactly. You know, being able to hang in with the uncomfortable is something for me that's a theme. And you know, that just took me back to so, you know, I trained as a professional dancer. You know, from the age of 10, I was very dedicated, and I was one of those kids that just knew what they were going to do when they grew up. And that was me, a professional dancer. So I went into that industry, and, you know, in that industry, you've got to walk into a room of an audition for your job, and in 200 people, and then they teach you choreography that you've got to pick up instantaneously and then perform it under high pressure, right? And, you know, that sets up a particular, I mean, that's a risk. You know, you walk down the front of that room. It's easy to hide at the back, easy to hide among the numbers, but you want that job, so you've got to take that risk, and you've got to get down there and just perform under pressure. So I think a lot of people don't like auditioning, but for me it was play. It was like, oh, this is a challenge, this is a risk. I might get the job, I might not, but I'm going to go down the front and I'm going to take that risk, you know. And often it paid off, you know, because if you move with risk, if you put risk that into momentum, you know, you're bringing yourself to that razor's edge that you just talked about, and then you either perform or you sink, you know. And most of us will kind of rise into that, you know, under that pressure. Most of us, not all of us, but so I think that's where I first, you know, learned about risk taking and that edge. And you know, and then later on, you know, after going into the profession and beginning to have a successful career, on a fateful day, I took a motorbike ride, and I was riding pillion on the back of that motorbike, and I was involved in a road traffic accident. And I would then from there end up in a wheelchair, and from there I was on crutches for a year, and my life as I knew it was completely over.
How old were you then?
I was 19.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And
puts in context.
yeah, you know, and you know, and again, I want to speak to risk, because I was following intuition, which is another huge part of my life. You know, what's rising up, what's emerging from the inside of me, right? And I was drawn to water for rehabilitation. Okay, so I followed that, and I'm thinking, okay, how's this possible? Okay, well, I have to take a risk. I'm walking on crutches on a slippery surface towards a swimming pool. And people are just, what? But again, it was like in taking that risk, in, following my flow, getting in that water, having complete muscle waste, but calibrating that brain body connection in water. And as we know we can we can create new synaptic connections in the brain. And I was in a place where I was taking the risk of not collapsing into disappearing, because my whole life had stopped. My identity, everything I identified with as being a dancer, gone. This career I was like blazing into, gone. Physicality, gone. So so that again was another risk that I often laugh about, that I actually remember how difficult it was to navigate that slippery floor on crutches with a broken leg. Risk.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there are these, moments, right? I mean, it's obviously many years ago, several years ago. I don't want to unduly date you, but
it was some years ago.
Thousands of years ago, when I was 19. But what's yeah, I mean, there's that kind of like, we can kind of remember these tiny little elements of things. I was hit by a car when I was 10, and there are moments like it kind of hit me from the side, and I reached out to in a way to kind of stop it, right, whatever, and reached out with my left hand and snapped off the kind of went up on the hood and snapped off the radio antenna, which broke my left thumb. But I do have this memory of kind of putting my hand out as if to stop the car. Didn't. But yeah, it's interesting. We kind of remember these these isolated moments, like you say, like walking across the slippery floor on crutches, and how we, because as you say, there's a risk there, but why we choose to put ourselves in that, right? There's something. And that's goes to your point maybe about intuition, that often there's some other knowing that goes beyond kind of rational judgment and calibration. That's like, well, I don't know why, but I need to do this, right? So like you're saying, right, there's something in you that said I need to. At age 19, after having a very debilitating accident, I need to get into water for therapy.
Yeah, and the only way that I came to that place was, I think, by just taking a pause. And funny enough, in many workshops that I offer and give, one of the emergent themes that rises up time and time again is permission to pause. So, a lot was going on in my life in that place of crisis. And I just found a place where I just like used my arms to kind of push everything away and just spread it out and away from me so that I could have some space, and just taking that pause to follow what I felt I needed to follow, and I think that's a huge thing today, that with all the outer noise and all the technology and the frenetic, fast-paced 21st century that we live in, I hear a lot of people, and myself sometimes, taking a pause by binge watching TV. We think that's taking a pause, right? But then in that space and in that place, that those emergent, like those vapors can't kind of rise up. I do think there's something internal that is always informing us. It's like lately, our lives, we've gone through so many changes. Our lives recently, we're moving to a different rhythm, and then in that we're trying to find our own rhythm. And then sometimes the rhythm gets really, really fast, frenetic beat, and it's like, if I just go faster, if I just work harder, if I just do this right now, then I can relax. But we often don't win the race against ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the issue for me, and the stresses just build up and up and up. So permission to pause is something I think I've worked with probably since the gift that that accident gave me was that.
Well, it's so beautiful to see it, like to phrase it as a gift, right, or to frame it as a gift. And you know, like what's really nice in speaking to you is that you're able to kind of pinpoint and highlight very specific things. And yeah, there are a million things, but you find something that resonates with you, a specific thing, and then build from that, right? So this idea around permission is really beautiful, because I think you're right that we don't often give ourselves permission, certainly to have that less structured, more floaty, kind of abstract, like time sense of being. You know, like I totally resonate. You know, when I have downtime, it's like, okay, let me catch up on my email, my Facebook, my, you know, binge watching something, right? And it doesn't really allow that, yeah, maybe as you say, like gassing off process of allowing whatever we've accumulated physically, emotionally, psychologically to process, to you know, to work its way through. Yeah, and so just permission to pause, to really just sit and pause. You know, I mean, there are people who talk and say, like, you know, if you just give yourself, like, if you've about to make a rash decision, if you give yourself half a second, 1 second, you can change that. So it's not like permission to pause is like, okay, take 2 weeks out of your life and don't do anything. You know, that it can be an instantaneous thing.
Absolutely.
And as you say, it really allows that connection to something internal.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that sometimes people might feel afraid of having that permission to pause and being internal. Okay, what will I find there? Right? But so for me, another layer of that is to be with what you're with, and then to, for instance, go for a walk and be mindless. You know, so like one of my greatest resources is to walk to the beach here. I live in West Sussex on this beautiful coast. As you know, you've visited here, you've walked these walks, you know, and you come to this great expanse. And the first thing that I notice are, there's people. That's nice. There's other people here just walking. And then I notice dogs, and that always makes me smile. And the dogs are playing, right? But as I'm watching that and I'm just being present with what is, and with what is internally, and with what is externally, in the mirror of that, it's like there's an interrelationship. And then I just start to almost like effortlessly just get information just by noticing what I notice, like mindfully, if you like. You know, so that's what I'm saying. It doesn't always have to be like you know, like I must sit down and I must focus really hard. It's like just giving ourselves permission to just shake it all off, be with what we're with in the day, and just put the body into movement. Gabrielle Roth, the pioneer of the 5 Rhythms dance movement, said, if you put the body in movement, and the psyche will heal itself.
And for you, right, that movement can just be, I'm taking a walk to the beach.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes I'll pause and I'll just like take an imprint of, you know, imagine I'm taking all that space, like and imprinting it internally. Breathe into that space. I might roll through my spine and roll back up and just stretch up to the earth, and then walk back on again. You know, just yeah.
I want to get into,
for me.
Yeah, I want to get into some of the more sort of like details of kind of some of the work you do. But what I just want to remark on there, which is really nice, is how that how that connection is like a gateway step into, you know, you and I have talked about intuition. I mean, our work with Marianne Madden, like that's kind of where we met, and she's a pioneer in intuition and bringing that understanding of inner knowing, of inner understanding, personal responsibility, and what else is really what I was remarking on is how there's this sort of deeper assumption or connection to, say, nature or the world we live in, because as you said, like there's this moment to kind of bring in like particularly we go on a walk in nature, right? We go to trees or forest or lake or sea or whatever, and you're saying it's like you can literally kind of like bring that in, breathe that into your wherever you are in something that gives you that space.
Yeah, because through movement, I really one of the things I like to work with is expansion and contraction. And often a lot of people that I work with are in a state of feeling somatically, mentally and emotionally in a contraction, because there's just so many things to deal with. So therefore the body responds to that place, and then we start triggering that fight and flight response. Then we're cycling cortisol around our body, which is like dumping acid in the body. And then we wonder, oh, I'm feeling really unwell, why? And so for me, it's really important to for people to feel in their bodies a sense of expansion and contraction, and then to kind of find where that neutral place is.
Or even the rhythm in it, right? Because I think you and I have talked about this, right? That if all you are is in contraction, for instance, then you're kind of robbing yourself of half of the experience. And one of the things that I think you and I are similar in is, even though it may be different methods or ways of doing it, is connecting with the natural systems, right? So we naturally exhale or inhale. We're moving into autumn here in the northern hemisphere, and so the leaves are falling off. I mean, one of the things I was going to say, you're talking about being. Yesterday afternoon, I lay down under a big plane tree, and I just took about 10-15 minutes and just watched the leaves fall off the tree. Where was the next one going to come from? And it goes to that point. It's like, well, that's happening, right? This tree, a million trees are doing that that's just what they do. That's their contraction, right? And in spring they'll have their expansion, and just to sort of align with that, even for a moment, right? Just take a few minutes lying under and sort of it becomes a game. It's like, oh, where's the next leaf going to come from? Am I gonna see it, or is it going to float out of my a vision? Is it going to come land right on me? Is it going to be a big leaf, a small leaf? I mean, it's a bit of a silly little play, but it was a fun just sort of way to spend 5-10 minutes on an afternoon, just to give that sense of expansion. But it goes to that point of like moving with or connecting with natural movements in nature. So expansion and contraction is clearly one of those.
Yeah, and in that, I'll often work with a metaphor of like, what am I opening to in my life right now, and what am I closing to? So following the accident that I was involved in, and my life just changed as I knew it. What I rose up from the ashes of that experience, and in my heart I was like called to create an inclusive arts organization, because I now had an empathy for what it's like to feel differently abled, so I wanted to work with people with diverse learning abilities and physical differences, and young developing performers that wanted to go into the industry, for instance. But and so I created Emerge Arts in 2001 with the intention of community, two different populations, if you like, two different a whole and diverse population coming together having a goal, like, which would be a performance, and taking a journey together and getting on that edge, you know. And you know, it was beautiful how each acted upon each other. You know, the performer is usually quite self-centric and has to be in that industry, and then they're working alongside people with additional needs, you know, who can just be more like sometimes more free and expressive. And so each, you know, they acted upon each other. I got to see that, you know, how nature, like how the sea acts upon a rock. And I got to literally see that in this this experiment that I stepped into when I created an inclusive organization. And you know, one of the things that people with diverse abilities, I noticed, bring is a sense of being. They're a being. They don't care if they're wearing the latest trainers. They don't care if they've had their hair cut at a trendy salon. You know, they were just like, I'm here, and they're being. And then, so the performer could actually learn from that when they were acting, and if they were overcoat acting and trying to be an actor, I could turn their attention to someone who was quadriplegic, possibly like sitting in a wheelchair, and he's playing Prospero, Shakespeare's Prospero, and a very intelligent man as well, and he could remember every single line beautifully, and it was really important to him. But you know, he was truly in that character because he was being with it, just being that character, whereas the actor was trying to be a something. And then those that were doing this for this fun and, you know, pleasure could look at the young developing performer and think, wow, what discipline they have. I want to be like them. I want to like work as hard as that. And so then I had a whole population, a whole community, all working hard together, but from just different curious angles. And so I think that risk is a part of adventure. I think curiosity is also a huge part of adventure. And just finally, to wrap that up, when we were speaking to nature within Emerge, we would, every single time that the season changed, we would bring that into class, and we would work with the metaphor of, like, it's autumn now. What do I want to let go of right now? What leaves am I dropping away? And we'd really simplify it for the understanding of some of those we were working with, but they got it. And so how does that move in your body in spring? You know, and what's wanting to emerge right now in spring? You know, so I've always naturally wanted to follow the rhythms, the natural rhythm. And when I'm not following it, I get very unwell, and I get really, really uncomfortable and angry, you know. And when I'm following it, it's like you could almost throw anything at me. I know I can take that walk, I can be with myself, but get out of self. I can actually bring in the larger sense of self in nature. I can bring that into my body, give my organs and my internal self some room, and then just kind of recalibrate and just come back home to my body, my bones, my blood, my muscles, my flesh, my cells. Just come back home to the body and just like let it come from the head and just move out into all my extremities. Just give myself some internal space, and then I can make better decisions from there. That's been my experience, you know.
Yeah, beautiful description. And yeah, I certainly found from my own experience as well that moving with or connecting with and understanding natural rhythms, energies is instructive. And I think, as you say, right, that there's a real value, and I certainly have this in my work, this value of curiosity or inquisitiveness, you know, like inquiry, right? That of what's going on, right, within me and outside of me, you know, what's really there, because, you know, as you say, that the more able, certainly again in my experience, that I am able to be in touch with what I'm feeling, how I'm reacting physically, emotionally to something, that's through food or movement or anything, then the better able I am to move through that, to transition. If it's a challenging time, to move out of that. If it's a beneficial time, how to maximize whatever's happening. And as you say, right, it's like the metaphor of nature. Right. So as autumn is here, right, leaves fall off trees. So it's not, it's metaphoric, right? It's like, well, this is happening, so we are part of this. Not that you are literally a tree, but you are part of nature in the way that bears go to hibernate, and trees lose their leaves. Like in many ways, we've lost that connection from modern world, but it doesn't separate us from that lineage, and again, from our experience, right? The closer we move to those energies and connections, the more in line with ourselves, and the more in line with external experiences.
Yeah, because I remember being a child, and I've also taught. I've been a teacher, lucky enough to work with children, and they don't need to ask permission. We don't need to ask permission when we're children. We're that natural, innate essence of us, those gifts and qualities, just start to percolate, and we just have an adventure with them. I remember working with children, and I turned all the lights off in the dance studio, had no windows, and I covered the floor in costumes, props, hats, glasses, whatever, and had them crawl in on their hands and knees in the dark to discover what they could discover. And then they just put it on randomly in the dark, and then lights went up, and whatever you were, that's what you've become. Right? And I almost feel like in a lot of corporate business, not just corporate, but all kinds of businesses, this could be quite a fun activity to do. What have I become? Because and I say that because when I hear about leaders, when I think about business leadership, right, and that position, I mean, I have compassion. I'm in that position, so I understand business leaders in that position, but instead of going towards judgment, leaning into curiosity. I've read so many beautiful articles about what was uncovered when they themselves said, I'm going to stop just leaning into, these salient points and I'm going to, when something goes wrong here, or what we determine is wrong, I'm going to lean into curiosity.
And I mean, because I think that, yeah, I think there's a real distinction there. It's like you're putting the point on sort of like a signpost, a bit of a marker, where there is something that comes up, and it's like there's this option, right? Like what you've shown, what you've experienced is like there's this option where one option is to go into judgment, and the other option is to go into curiosity. Or maybe there's a different distinction there, but that's a really, and what helps the choice in that? Because a lot of people will just say, yeah, but I can't do anything about my judgment. Like it's just there, and I freeze. So I'm worried about what other people think of me. I don't do this as well as somebody next to me. Yeah, because I think for and maybe we can get into some of the more detail of the work that you do provide. Specifically now, I know you've done a lot over the years to get people into that space where they give themselves permission to be curious.
Yeah, for me, embodiment comes straight in there. Because what I'm trying to say is, when we come here to the earth and we come and have this life, we have a natural sense of play and a natural sense of curiosity and adventure. Not all children, but mostly that's what we talk about. We talk about when I was a child and I felt free and everything else. But then, you know, because we've lost that, and we're in these structures that are so rigid, then of course what happens is we embody that rigidity. So somebody comes to us with a problem, we instantly tense up because we know it's got to, you know, it's got to tick this box, that box, or not that box and this box, you know. And I think that we're shifting that in the field of our awareness in leadership. And if somebody is having difficulty with that, the best thing you can take them back to is their own vulnerability, their own sense of taking a creative risk. And that's where I use the creative process. And, you know, so we can actually allow ourselves to get it wrong, it's all right. Or just have a random idea, or I just had an inspiration, and here's a permissive space that I can allow that. And when you bring leaders and team members together in those spaces, and it kind of, that, because it's an innate gift we all have, creativity, it sort of like levels the field. And then, you know, when you bring people into homeostasis in their own body, a state of homeostasis, instead of being in the fight flight response and constantly on that biofeedback loop with the brain body connection, if you change, if you allow them to experientially feel a different sense of themselves, feel the brain body connection supporting them, and then give them creativity to play with on top of that, quite often they can sort of crack out of that shell a little bit, even if it's a little bit at first, you know. That's my experience. So yeah, if someone's struggling with judgment to curiosity, I would play with both of those things. You know, I would embody judgment. What does judgment feel like in the body? Does the breath move freely, or is it restricted? You know, and then play with how does my body move when it's moving with curiosity? You know, and I often do that in business workshops with posture play. So we'll play with the postures of collapse, contract, neutral, and then extend and hyperextend. And then we move around the room and we're like, we'll try to communicate to somebody in hyperextend with your chest up here, and see if you can actually make a connection with someone, and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And it gets really playful and people laugh, and suddenly we're back all being human. And then we can come to a solution. We can find a creative process that works, where everyone can bring forward what they're passionate about, because that's the way you're going to get a great business running, a great results, optimal results.
And I think a lot of organizations are coming around to that, and often it's interesting because I think like we're kind of uncovering some of the initial challenges that people in organizations find, because the first thing that struck me, right, is how you spoke about, you know, going into the creative process, because you know, I think for a lot of people, you know, particularly from a corporate background, I mean, I've worked in corporate for 20 years, and I can see this in myself, and certainly many other people I worked with, where the concept of creativity is a bit anomalous to the kind of corporate environment, because going back to the concept of risk, because there's lots of risk in that, and there's an assumption that, oh, well, creative people, you know, often, like, I mean, particularly now, like with social media, but, you know, even, you know, when we'd go to a gallery or a museum and you'd see somebody's work, right, you see a finished product and you just think, well, I could never do that. and you don't see the millions of sketches and hours of mistakes and all that go into that, which is the creative process.
Or the crumpled up bits of paper, the smashed sculptures.
and more and more, you know, with social media, it's like, well, the creative process is putting up
perfect
everything's
all the time.
Absolutely perfect.
Perfect, you know.
Exactly.
But that's the whole thing, isn't it? We have to be perfect. Our image has to be perfect. Our weight, our body, all these things. I mean, it's just like we've like knocked the hell out of perfection. You know, it's like, and now we're coming through the other side. And it's like, well, but how far does that really take us? That separate and dividing us because I lean more towards the proverb of like, if we go together, we can go further when we go together, right?
Yeah.
If I go alone, I can go quickly, but if I go together, I can go further. We can go further, So yeah, it's like that perfectionism thing. Yeah. And the things are changing. Things are definitely changing. We're especially in the business. What I see in the business world, where it was originally, we're all about the profit and financial growth and profit, and now like we've had to, because it's kind of run its course. So the architecture of how it works has had to start flexing and bending to accommodate the tensegrity that's wanting to come in, which I call the balance. So now we have at the top of the list values. What are the values? What are our company values? What is our culture? What are our values? Innovation is second on the list now, and then financial growth, and then leadership effectiveness, and then maximizing human potential, which I'm so excited about that's now landing on lists. It's like, yes, because really in my work, that's what I've always been getting at is that, that metaphor of like, if I could have a broken leg in myself, I tell myself, if I could have a broken leg and navigate crutches, hopping on one leg on a slippery floor and still make it into a swimming pool. It's like human potential. It's because I had a drive, I believed I could, and I was tapping into the state of flow. I was tapping into that altered state of flow where the neurochemicals were being released in my body, dopamine, serotonin, and anandamide, norepinephrine. My body and brain were in a state of, yes, I can. Because I want to survive, and not only do I want to survive, I want to thrive. So therefore, this wasted leg, I have to give it what it needs to rebuild itself, give it the right environment, the right love and attention. So I kind of see things very holistically in business, as in the same way that I did in rehabilitating myself from an accident where 2 bones came through my leg, and I lost half an inch of length in one leg. It's like I see that metaphor, and I've always carried that with me in business. Yeah.
And maybe it's a good time to open up because you mentioned human potential. I know that's the sort of the focus of the business you have now. So love to kind of hear what that means for you. And I love the sense that like you look back and it's like, well, your potential to there's potential to recover from something like that. There's also potential not to recover, right?
Yeah.
And you're in this case where you said you're in a wheelchair, you're on crutches for a year. I mean, at that age, I mean that's quite challenging. And then yet to like there are things in my life like I look back on that I accomplished, and I'm not quite sure how I did them, except that I just said, well, this is going to happen. I don't know how, I mean, I can look back 20, 30 years ago, like some of the things I did in terms of career or personal relationships. And it seemed like that it was, well, it definitely was not a certainty. And yet I just said, yeah, but I'm making this happen. I don't know how, but I'm just choosing for this to happen. I'm sure there are things that I failed at. Maybe I said that as well, but there are definitely things that stick out that I think I don't know how I did this, except by telling myself that I was going to accomplish this. Is that some of what you see in human potential, or we talk a bit more, because I know it's like a foundation for what you're doing with your work now.
Yeah, I do see that as rooted in human potential. But I also want to say that as much as I had those thoughts of like, I need to rise up from the ashes of this experience in my own way, I had help. I could not have done that alone. As much as I could be like, yes, I'm a renegade and I'm going to do this and there was that element, there was that part of the architecture, but then there were supportive structures and architecture around that that allowed me to when it was really, really tough to keep going, if you like, as well as my own. So So I think it's this, the small self and the big self that we were speaking to earlier, the micro, the medio, and the meta, right? So me, and then my community, and then as connected to the world, as connected to the whole. So, for me, I knew I had more to share. I was at zero. I was in what I call, I think there's growth and there's decay, growth and decay. And I feel like this kind of rhythm, and that, if anyone says that your life is just this all the time, I'd love to have a conversation with them. I'd be interested to hear about that, but mostly it's like growth and sometimes decay, and growth and decay. So that's where I was with my experience. I've carried that throughout all of my life. Human potential to me is about us understanding and connecting to the power of the brain-body connection. That and tapping into these higher states of consciousness and getting into peak performance. That excites me as a person. It excites me for you. It excites me for my neighbor. It excites me for, businesses in the world, So where I first experienced that was when I was actually 10 years old. I was an athlete, and I was a British championship baton twirler. And that is where I learned about the brain-body connection, for sure. And also, like, what we can do, what we can actually do. When you're working in that way and at that level, first of all, you have to have discipline. You practice for hours and hours and hours. So you really come to understand, like, the limits of your physicality and the edges of your mental landscape and your emotional self, right? So at that age, I would say that that's where I learned about the brain-body connection and altered state of flow. When you're tossing a baton 25 feet in the air and you are spinning underneath it, and your brain is able to turn in space, time and space, track that baton that is a thin piece of metal that's spinning as it's falling back down to earth, and take a snapshot of it at a particular angle so you can turn away from it and catch it behind your head in what we would call a blind catch. If that is not an example of the brain-body connection and the altered state of flow, or calibrating, coming together, and time and space disappears, and somehow that baton that you've tossed with velocity is spinning those fast revolutions, your brain can see it slower than it's actually moving through time and space. And you can spot it and catch it at a right angle to catch it blindly behind your head. So, that comes into my work because I know it. I know that is possible. I've experienced it on a somatic level, mental, emotional level. So a lot of my work with businesses now is I'm very interested in helping with health, well-being strategies, because first of all, we've got to be well, and then bringing creative process through the door. And through that creative process, taking people into experientially experiencing the altered state of flow, or colloquially known by athletes as getting in the zone. It's another term for it, isn't it? But that place where you're so absorbed in what you're doing, right? And why? Because you're passionate. And there something gets created. And what we hear in a lot of our workplaces is, I'm not passionate about it. I hate my job. I do it because it pays the bills, and all these things. And I'm just like, I really don't believe that it has to be that way. But it does take leadership change. It does take organizational change. And we are already doing that. There's some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies in the world, Google, Microsoft, they've tapped into that. And they're working with some of the most creative and productive and peak performance people in the world, and they're getting things done. So that's really what the DFAR Human Potential business that I've created is, a platform for businesses to, it provides strategy really for them to have a look at and say, oh, could we use that? And are we going to take a risk and a creative risk and dare and try it,
And yeah, I mean, one thing that I can imagine would show up as a challenge is, one of the things you talked about throughout this time is that you've kind of had this, you knew quite early on, like say at the age of 10, you knew you wanted to be a dancer, even despite sort of quite challenging, temporary crippling debility, you stayed on to that, and you've created something from that. You've created a movement therapy, dance therapy, for people with physical and mental challenges. Working with organizations, and I think for some people listening, they might say like, oh yeah, but she's always had that. She's kind of known since she was 10, but I don't have that, right? And it goes to that point, like you were saying, where oftentimes, and I certainly run into people in organizations that they're not happy what they're doing, but they're doing it because they don't see another opportunity that pays the bills. It ticks enough boxes, and so, I mean, I guess it's like, how do you work with those people? And is it as much about getting a leader to direct them? Is it about getting a leader to incentivize them to take the lead? How does that actually work on a practical level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a person in leadership definitely is demonstrating by example. So, we're kind of, people in teams are looking to them. So the inner shift has got to kind of be with them as well as a team. And I actually see it more as a hive mind approach. So that's why I like, if I'm running workshops, it's no good just giving it to the team. The leader, the person in leadership role, management, must be involved in that too. And we've all got blocks. We all have personal blocks. We all have things we feel comfortable with, uncomfortable with. And I would say that when I was for 12 years working as a lecturer in a particular college where I worked with people with challenging behavior, as well as learning difficulties and other things going on. So, and they taught me so much, because they made me have to become adaptable, flexible, curious, take a risk. Because I was working with these groups, and what I noticed was we all have like things we naturally lean towards. So some people in that group, somebody wanted to move it, somebody else needed to say it, somebody else needed to draw it, somebody else needed to enact it, somebody else needed to be behind the camera of it, and they have that. So it challenged me, instead of saying, right, well, here are these tasks we have to achieve, and we're all going to have to be the same in this. We've got, this is the umbrella, we all have to get in it. So what we did was we found the individual gifts and qualities within the group, and we're able to cohese that and then mobilize and move together to achieve a common goal and vision. So because some of them would say, well, I don't dance, I'm not going to move, I don't want to do this, don't want to do that. And in business workshops, I've come up against those same brick wall, people have come up against those walls in themselves, and then of course I experience those walls. So it's really about having a very wide toolbox to draw from, and awareness, and meeting that person in a place that where you can just allow that to draw forth some of what is internally within that person. And that's where the arts and embodiment actually is a great support, a platform and a framework for that to take place. I mean, I'm a Tamalpa life art process practitioner. So we work with embodiment, we work with movement, drawing, creative writing, dialogue, and enactment. And we'll, depending on who we're working with, we'll draw forth what we need to play with. what's in the environment, and how can we best draw forth, creativity here.
Yeah.
Aliveness and play and fun and adventure, And I do think that every adventure has an element of risk and dare. And I think creativity is even daring. It's playful, but it's daring creativity.
Yeah.
So we have to hold people, compassionately in that place as well, to know that it might be uncomfortable for them, and then resource them, give them different tools,
I think that's a really, good point. Like, we work in a similar space, but as I say, with very different methods. And I know not a lot of other people who work in, I don't know, I mean, you could call it many different things, personal development or human potential. There's a therapeutic element to it, although I wouldn't say that's necessary, right? And there is this, like I do see this allowing people to feel comfortable with risk, or getting it quote unquote wrong, whatever that is, right? We have to kind of see that, okay, we have that tendency to see as something is wrong or imperfect, but that doesn't really matter, right? It's actually in the, because you can, I think you can move people to a place where you can move beyond that, dance and other movement. And it's interesting what you say, like, that in particularly in organizations, right, you've got to have that leadership buy-in, because the directed sort of like, well, I'm the manager and you guys are all going to go do the training, and then you can report back or whatever, doesn't really create the environment for that. And certainly when when I work with people, when it's tapping into the leaders, right? It's like, well, the leader, the manager, the director, the CEO, whomever, he or she has to want things to change or transform in the organization. Then we've got something to work with.
Definitely, because the bottom line is trust. Trust, bottom line. And if a leader can gain the trust by being vulnerable themselves, being brave and vulnerable themselves, they gain the trust of a team. Well, that's all you'd ever wish for as a leader.
Yeah.
Really, because then you're in a cohesion, you're in something that's breathing, it's a living organ, it's moving, because without trust, you've got people holding back, you've got employee absenteeism, you've just got like people turning up to work like zombies, like, I'm here, but because otherwise I'm going to get fired. None of it works. It's a trust, the bottom line there.
And
sure.
the other thing I just wanted to mention, because it's sort of been on my mind throughout this call, is I think it just goes to like an assumption around like levels of competence or ability. So this won't be, if you're listening to this, you won't be able to see this, but Donna, behind you on the wall are 3 or 4 paintings that I've noticed and see them more clearly. And what I love is, I know that they're your paintings. Somebody else might see it's like, oh well, that's her young daughter's or young son's sort of finger things, but exactly, they're yours, right? And so it's as much about that permission to express, right? It doesn't have to look, we're not doing things like the movement or art or something so that it ends up in a gallery so that we have a job from it. It's as much about connecting to a type of expression that will allow something to come from it, some creative process, some learning process. And what you were saying is that, in like with Emerge, right, that rather than sort of saying everybody's got to have competence in all these areas, certain people would say like, well, I don't feel comfortable dancing, or I would prefer to do this, right? And so it's working with somebody's innate skills or interests, and then providing a platform for that to really flourish, or even to try new things.
Exactly. Yeah. To allow their innate gifts and qualities to flourish. and allow others to see their strength. And then they're more likely, when they feel empowered, they're more likely to say, well, actually, I noticed you've got that strength, and I'm going to try a little bit of that on for size. Because we're now not in a dog eat dog environment. We're in an environment that is supportive to the whole to emerge and rise up, you know. So it's more conducive to growth and development, you know, when we come in through that doorway. But, you know, the other thing I wanted to talk to as well is that the work through the Tamalpa Life Art process, and the way that I've always worked as well, is it's not result oriented, it's process oriented. So we're in that, you know, we're more focused into the process then, not just the result. You know, it's not just like we haven't got time to deal with all that other stuff, because we've just got to hit this profit margin, we've got to get that target done. That's what I mean. It's we take time out to actually allow ourselves to be in process. And then what do we learn in that? We learn so much in that place if we allow ourselves. And we use Lawrence Halprin's RSVP cycle. So R stands for resources. So here we are, we're in a workshop, like, you know, we're looking at this particular issue within the organization, or we're looking at this, you know, that we want to be more creative and innovative. So what resources do we need? Okay, well, you know, we might need this, this, and this, but actually the people here are resources too. So it allows us, it's a framework so that we can start to sort of look at what is the human potential here, you know. So resources, then we create a score. And it's either an open score or a closed score.
So what does that mean in terms of a score? Because I think of score as like a score of music. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Lawrence Halprin called it a score, and it's really what you intend to explore. So it just gives some framework to what is going to be happening. Okay, so we might, you know, it depends on what the situation is, but it can either be more closed or it can be really open, so that creativity just expands and expands and expands. And then we come back to center. And then we value act it. And we you know, sorry, P is for performance and enactment. So we enact whatever that score is. And afterwards we value act it. We say, well, you know, that was great, but you know, I see what you're getting to there, what you were getting at, but I just wonder if we tried it this way. I'm imagining that actually something else may happen. Okay, great. So let's recycle the score. Let's just like rejig that part, and let's enact it. And let's see what happens from there. So it's a creative methodology for collaboration that is much more process oriented than result oriented. And so that's one of the tools that we use. But you arrive at the result, of course, through the process.
Yeah. I mean, so it is about result, but it's, as you say, there's focus on, because it's got this 4-part step, that there's a focus on process, which is, you know, it's quite nice. I mean, I think you and I have spoken about how, I mean, even the creative process, right, has many different ways, but it's when you provide a structure onto a learning opportunity, because oftentimes, you know, like in the past, right, I think you and I've talked about things where things have happened and we may not know how they happened, so it's very difficult to replicate them or to see if it was real in some way. So we can kind of think like, well, was that just luck or coincidence? And when we have like some creative structure, a process or something, that we say, well, it's not that, I mean, you know, maybe you can speak to those 4 things. It's not like those things are exclusive and that's it, right? But it's they're ways of looking at the territory. It's like, well, if we start just looking at resources, for instance, there's many different ways to do that. And then when we go to score and on down the line, and that, yeah, that structure is, you know, it's a bit more like a bamboo scaffolding than, you know, like an entire building finished, right? It's got
Yeah,
some flex and movement in it, and
exactly.
you can put a lot on it.
And
Yeah.
everyone's holding that structure. You know, when you're working with teams, everyone's flexing in that. And because there is movement, suddenly someone gets aha moment quite often, you know, because it's not locked down. It's not locked down.
Mm.
It's a permissive, flexible, moving, it's a formative shape that everyone's moving in. Yeah, so it allows for that. You know, in scoring, Taylor, I mean, like I'll create a personal score. You
Mm.
know, I'll score for my life. You create a personal score. It might be something like, okay, so today I want to tap into my creative imagination. Yeah, I want to, like, I'm feeling a bit blocked and a bit locked down, and I kind of just want to, open my mind. So, you know, how that will look for me is that I'll often spend time coming home first to my body. So I might score 10 minutes movement ritual
Mm.
just to return home to my body and breath, and just to balance my nervous system, to regulate my nervous system, and just land. And then I'll explore. I might explore a metaphor of, for instance, what am I, like I said, what am I moving towards in my life, and what am I moving away from right now? And then I'll bring that through the body. You know, what am I, and I'll give that shape in the body as I explore it. And then I'm listening into the body, and I'm noticing what I notice, feeling what I feel, hearing what I hear, as I'm moving my body with that question, and I'm noticing any images that might be arising at that time. Yeah. So it's an exploration, and I might score doing that. It depends on how much time I have, but I might just go, I've got 15 minutes for that. And then off the back of that, if I've got time, I'll go, great, I can have some further creative play, and I'll land that into a drawing.
Mm.
And then I'll look at that drawing and I'll say, right, what shape, what symbol, what color is really calling out to me to want to be brought into movement. And whatever it is usually ripe, you know, it's got a message, you know, because this has landed out of yourself, and this is everything that's moving with inside you that's now landed out onto paper. Yeah. And obviously if you're working in a personal way, it can have that level of inner inquiry and that level of seriousness. But we can also work with this process on the surface level, creatively, just creatively. And you know, and what happens is when you're working through that weaving between movement and drawing and creative writing, for instance, right? You are getting that brain body connection biofeedback loop going, you know, and you're starting to get informed of things that were locked away, shut away, not visible. You just bring in the invisible to the visible realm. And then, like you said, you've got something to work with now, because there it is on paper.
Mm.
And when you moved that shape in your drawing, what it meant was, I'm ready to take a risk. I'm ready to let the adventure of myself forwards. And because you've moved it and you've acknowledged it, and it's been witnessed by yourself and maybe a partner, then a bit like the work that you do, you know, very much those beautiful experiential exercises that we did together in the intuitive coaching work that you do, you know, you're being witnessed in that. Now it's real. Now it's real. Now you can move with it. Now you're free. You're free.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, that's a score. A score can be, like I said, like very closed, like I just described, or it could be open, like go to the beach, walk to the water's edge, work with movements above and below. And that could look different for every single person that moves towards the edge of the beach and works with the sense of above and below.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. There's two things I just want to pick up on there, because I think they're really interesting. One, it's really helpful to have the sort of further explanation on the score that you talked through, because it puts it in a sort of a real live example that's very tangible. So that's sort of like, okay, take 10 minutes to do this, or 15 minutes to do this, or go to the beach for half an hour, right? It's like the parameters around which you're setting, which you might do anyway. You might just say, well, I'm going to walk to the beach for half an hour. And what's really nice, like here, is like, it's about, you know, when you have a set of practices, about using them strategically, right?
Mm.
It's not that you're doing 24 hours a day dance and therapy and trying to figure yourself out, right? We've got, you know, we want to live lives, we want to enjoy ourselves, and
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
it's what's interesting is, like, I think people can see, imagine what it's like, you know, working with a group for you. But what's really nice to hear is that, you know, for you, it's like there are tools that you can use for your daily practice, you know, whether it's 10 minutes or you take an hour or something, that
Mm,
are going to benefit you either creatively in something you're
mm,
creating for a client, or a new project, or just because you're just struggling a bit, you're having a bad day, it's been gray and rainy out for 5 days running, and you just, like, you need to move something. And so you have this that you can say, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes, I'm going to dance
mm,
through this, I'm going to
mm,
draw through this, and I'm just going to, you know, feel into what this means, right? So there's this, like, ability to make things practical, right? Because I think ultimately, you know, going back to human potential, it's like, well, that is going to give you a better excuse me, give you a better foundation, um, understanding for what it is you're bringing out for yourself, your own growth, but also, you know, what you're doing professionally, and with other friends. And the other thing I think is really nice, as you say, is there's that, when you actually, the thing about transformational work is, often it's as much about putting something out there, right? The witnessing it, just acknowledging it. You know, oftentimes, you know, going back to fear and risk, sometimes people, when they look at something that they're fearful of inside themselves, or, you know, connection with another person, they may have had a grudge with another person for 10 years, and they think, oh my God, I could never bring this up because it's been 10 years, and, you know, we hate each other, whatever
yeah.
it is, right? And often, you know, I've worked with clients, and my own self as well, and the people that have helped me and facilitated me in this as well, where just speaking something, whether it's, you know, writing it down on paper, speaking it out loud, speaking it to somebody just random and objective, or speaking it to the person to whom it relates,
Mm,
and just by that mere act, and as you say, there is a witnessing, whether we're witnessing ourselves, or often more powerfully somebody else
mm,
is witnessing in that, it brings it out, right? So now it's out in
mm,
the open, it's out for us to see and work with, and
yeah.
it ceases to have the power it had over us when it was sort of tucked down deep inside, buried.
Mm. That's the saddest thing. So many people are sitting in office spaces with innovation within them, but just not feeling it's always a permissive environment to bring that forward. And then secondly, there's the you know, we have this on the table and we've got to get it done now, right? And it's all about, like, just getting to that finishing line. It's end result, end game, end game. And you know, the great thing about being in the creative process and using the scoring RSVP cycles is, people, you know, they get the permission to, oh my gosh, let's run that, let's imagine that, let's run that, and actually to sit down afterwards and value act it and say, well, okay, what would we recycle, you know. And when I work together with my colleagues in Tamalpa, in the Tamalpa Institute, you know, we'll often, like, we've just given a workshop and something happens and we say, oh, okay, I'd like to speak to this and how I'd recycle it. What do you guys think?
And when you say recycle, that kind of like, as you might go through another iteration or demonstration or something, so what do you save from that worked well?
It can be a myriad. Oh, sorry. It can be a myriad of things. It might be something. What I'm saying is, once you take that framework into your life and into yourself,
Mm.
something may happen, and it might just be a simple life recycle. So this happened with a particular friend, and I didn't really enjoy that. But how would I recycle that experience?
I see.
because it's become just part of your framework in life. It's just a simple framework. Oh, how would I recycle that? And I'm speaking to that because it's very useful to me. And then in the professional realm, you know, oh, how would we recycle that on something simple? And then in the creative process, okay, how would we recycle that so that we may experience a different possibility, a different result? And then that there's permission to say, well, we've got this part, we like how this part works and that part runs, and we saw that a possibility jettisoned off of that, and we're going to bring that back in, and we're going to make that the next step in the process, you know. So yeah, yes, Jim, come forwards. We understand that actually that was something that you really could speak to. So can we give you we'll give you like, say, 10 minutes to talk on that in the score, and we'll just listen, we'll be witnessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, it's just like bringing the invisible visible, you know, it's like tapping into really what's there, allowing it to come out, trying it on for size, recycling, and then going, okay, cool. Yeah, we're all as a consensus, we all like the way this is moving now. We've got some great things to work with. Let's get that move. Let's carry that forth, bring it forth. Yeah, it works in that way.
Nice. Well, thanks, Donna. I mean, this has really been interesting. I think we could spend hours continuing to talk, but I do just want to end maybe with, because it goes back to something you were saying, like, because I think you do a lot of, you know, embodiment work, and, you know, for people listening, I mean, you know, what are kind of like a couple, you know, really go-to very simple things that people can try on, can test out, to say, okay, well, you know, to start to go into that, you know, exploring their own risk and exploration of what's possible for them.
Okay, I've got something that comes to mind instantly. So what I like you to do is just find your feet hip distance apart, and you'll be in a standing position or sitting, but better to be standing. And as you breathe into your feet, imagine you could really breathe into the ground and connecting your feet to the ground, as if you could breathe through your feet to connect to the ground. And you'll soften your knees, you'll have your pelvis loose and weighted towards the earth. And just remember that when you give the weight of your body towards the earth, as Mr. Isaac Newton said, the earth is pushing back. So feel that force of the earth traveling up in through your feet, up into your calves, your knees, your thighs, your pelvis, and allow your pelvis to be weighted towards the earth. From the upper spine, allow that to float up towards the heavens, and imagining that your head could just rest on the top of your atlas bone, just as like a helium balloon, lightly resting there. And really get a sense of the heavens and how you are in between these two polarities of the above and the below. And breathe there. Remembering to breathe. Noticing how much energy it actually takes for your whole body to hold itself up against gravity right now. All the muscles, tendons, ligaments, everything that's coming into action to hold you up against the gravity that's acting upon you from the above, pushing you down towards the earth. And so in a risk-taking motion, what I want you to do, you'll take a breath in, and when you're ready, you're going to consciously release the heaviest part of your body over, give it over to gravity, releasing your chin towards your chest, releasing your neck, and allow yourself to feel the weight of your own head. And then notice how gravity is acting through your shoulders now, your torso, your rib cage, and allow yourself to soften all of the bones of your body. And you would begin to bend your knees, soften through the pelvis, bend your knees, and you're rolling through your spine here. And as if your head was as if you were bowing towards the earth, bowing down towards the earth. Your head is descending towards the earth. And you'll come to a deep squat. Your arms will just be hanging. And then what I'd like you to do is unfurl your spine back up to a standing position, bone by bone by bone. Imagine you were a fern leaf unfurling towards the sun, maybe. Breathing the whole time throughout this whole process. And just returning back to a standing position, but noticing the energy it takes to stand back up, lift your spine, come back up to a standing position against gravity, but with the earth supporting you, coming up to meet your feet. I prefer that exercise, standing and rolling, melting and rolling through the spine, and then unfolding back up to standing. But that'll give you a general sense.
That's beautiful. No, I mean, even just sitting with that was really, really beautiful. I've got, it just gives a sense of presence. Like you say, that just that pause to connect with and what is with our bodies and how we are in the space we're in.
And how much, and appreciating and really acknowledging and bowing down to the wisdom that our bodies can give to us. As you're rolling through your spine, and you're toning all those nerve endings that connect into the spine as well, and you're getting a sense of you in your anatomical structure, you in your physical self. And as you start to melt through the spine, you'll come to a place and you'll be breathing and you think, oh, the breath just stopped. So hang out in that pause. Hang out in that pause with your head hanging towards the earth and breathe. Acknowledge that, I need to give a bit of room to my organs here. I need to give a bit of room to my mental, emotional landscape here, maybe. And then, and as you exhale, soften the bones and continue to roll and melt and fold through the body. So it's really about moving with that awareness of really returning home to the body's own innate wisdom and what it can inform us of. Beautiful.
Well, returning to the innate wisdom of the body, I think we've had a good adventure for the day. Thank you, Donna, so much for taking time to be with us.
Thank you,
put information in, we'll put information in the show notes on your companies if people want to check that out. And hope to have you back. Maybe we can do some more movement work on a later show.
Love to do some embodied mindfulness with everyone. That would be beautiful. And I was gonna, in just speaking to this beautiful podcast that you've begun and having this opportunity to share with people and speaking about the adventure self, I wanted to just share the last words from a John O'Donoghue poem, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay, everyone. So this is called For a New Beginning. Let's just take a breath in together, everyone. Return home to our bodies, our breath, and our innate gifts and qualities. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease with risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Mr. John O'Donoghue. Thanks, everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Donna. Thanks for that poem. It was really beautiful.
You. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Great.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, go on, be adventurous. Click the subscribe button. Join us next week for a new adventure Until then,